Does Elden Ring have a good soundtrack? Of course it does. But what exactly makes it good? Sometimes we as video game fans can love a song or soundtrack, but can't quite pin down the reason. I'm a professional opera singer who's performed for over a decade, and I wanted to find out what exactly makes Elden Ring's music so good, but also to help you better understand your own favorite soundtracks. So I listened to the entire soundtrack after playing it a year ago and analyzed every song. So while I won't cover every single song here in this video, I'm going to highlight the songs that show what makes Elden Ring's score so exceptional. And we're going to start, fittingly, where the game begins. The character select music is so simple, but so effective. Shoei Miyazawa masterfully hangs us out to dry with constant long bowings of strings with dissonance, which exudes a sense of bleakness that pervades even as we customize our Tarnished One. This leaves us in a mournful state, mournful about something we don't actually even know yet. The beauty is the simplicity, the way the strings intertwine and embrace each other with a sense of sonic emptiness. We have sustained notes in the low strings, while the cellos, a very earthy sound, ascend and descend almost as if they're trying to escape a chasm or a pit, yet never can. But what ties it together is the occasional thrust of a bass drum. Boom. Boom. Like lightning in the distance. It pervades the overwhelming sense of misery with an almost metronomic sense of return, like the drums hint at something dangerous awaiting us. Though this bleakness doesn't ever actually improve when we finally arrive in the lands between. Limgrave is quite frankly haunting. It's a series of long, sustained bowings with a pervasive tremolo in the distant background strings. It makes us feel like something is behind us at every turn. It doesn't matter how strong we become, the dissonance always wins. Those long bowings dig into our skin, invasively almost, implying that this world is beautiful, yet broken. There are moments where we hear the remembrance of something almost beautiful, with the horns that conjoin with the strings, yet the space after each sustained string phrase leaves us feeling empty. We're left longing for something. Every time the strings come back, it almost feels like we're being cut by the sound of death. As we move into the cave, there's a type of regression in the sound, which does something interesting. This recurring light bowing on the strings with large caesura gaps makes us feel like the cave's emptiness threatens to consume us where we are as we enter. The strings play so lightly, we almost long for the haunting sounds from outside, from before, or anything to break this oppressive void. And then we get something. A soft tremolo within the strings comes and goes, which causes such an unnerving sense. You feel like you're being watched or hunted, only to quickly disappear as if it was never there to begin with. The spider crawls further up our backs, only for us to swat it away and realize there was nothing there to begin with. It's easily one of the simplest of the Elden Ring tracks. Almost not music at all, if you will. Almost just sound effects, ambience, but done through instrumentation, which is certainly not a normal occurrence. So all of this already shows us something unique about Elden Ring, and we're starting to see what makes its soundtrack great. One might say that it's impossible to appreciate the music in between the boss fights, as those are usually the most iconic songs in Fromsoft games. But in this particular case, I'd say that they're wrong. This music is so subtle, it is almost vicious. It encroaches on us, it violates our ears, and invites terror and stress. A general sense that we do not belong here, and there's a clever way many songs do this, which I'll get to in a moment. There is some confusion about the importance of ambient music that I sometimes see, that it isn't as valuable as melodic music, but nearly all ambient music is designed to prioritize atmosphere. The music in Caelid, a prime example, which sounds like a hot summer day in hell with mosquitoes desperately hunting for blood to consume, is vitally important to the story and setting. Without it, yes, Caelid is still an awful place visually, but it ceases to be as uncomfortable or terrifying. Ambient music is profoundly important to expanding the sense of terror and dread as the giant bugs buzz around your face, seeking you, wanting you, needing you. Ambient music is as vital as melodic music in this particular case. And this soundscape continues in much of the game, whether it's Stormville Castle, Liurnia of the Lakes, or the most terrifying and disturbing one of all, the great underground rivers, a mixture of tribalism and dissonant chant with clashing soprano and mezzo singers. It's enough to make you want to bite your nails in discomfort and leaves you with a desire for it to end. There's a technique that makes much of this music unsettling. Most songs function in a key, where a chord is the center point and everything around that chord relates to it. But when we start to flirt with atonality, we find something interesting. This is composition that doesn't require or lean on a specific central note or chord structure or key. So what we end up getting is typically uncomfortable and discordant, where every note that is played serves the mood or atmosphere rather than revolving around the key or chord, like planets orbiting a sun. This is why some of the tracks in Elden Ring are so unnatural. Even someone who doesn't know music theory can usually tell something's off with atonal songs, or songs that flirt with atonality. Before we move into the boss themes, and don't worry, I have a lot to say about them, there's one song I want to discuss because it follows the ideas we just discussed, but with a unique twist. Leyendell Royal Capital. Leyendell Royal Capital gives us something important amidst all the tension and discomfort. There is this constant ebb and flow of the instruments like waves crashing against the shore. Here for a moment, we trade vicious atmosphere for bleakness. We have a choir representing an almost religious environment. The strings and low percussion make us feel like we have entered the kingdom of God, a haunting and bleak landscape destroyed that was once the last bastion for the people in this world. It's comforting in a sad sort of way. A distant periodic drum calls back to the character select. It gives us the illusion that we're safe from the thunder and the danger. There's also something we don't usually hear in castles or fortress themes. The guitar-like instrument, which gives us a way deeper sense of humanity. We see in front of us a vast city, a mighty land of champions and peace, decimated, left to rot. There is humanity in this music, or the essence of it anyway. With the tremolo in the guitar-like lute instrument, a hand reaching out in the darkness, asking to be pulled from it. The theme of waves crashing against the shore is actually predominant in the entire soundtrack. Ebbs and flows are super consistent, and I want to talk about that soon, but first, let's leave ambience and move into danger. Not 10 minutes into the lands between, we are thrust into an all-out battle with one of the Erdtree Knights. We have our first taste of sharp rhythm and terrifying brutality. A warning to New Tarnished that this world is inhospitable, and we are not invited. The cellos, which feature so prominently throughout the game, descend us into madness. The choir of men sing in unison, like an unrelenting force. We are thrust into an all-out conflict with a ferocious, nameless adversary that blocks our path and will not stop at nothing to bear down on us with righteous judgment and ferocity. Much of this is implied in the score. Mighty low brass, sharp rhythms and triplets as the male choir sings in unison with the low strings, the timpani pounding in the background. This is our first introduction to the torrential violence we will face in this harsh land, and it only moves up from here. Boss themes in Fromsoft games have always been the highlight. Whether it's Margit the Fell Omen or the ever-dutiful Lich Dragon Fortisax, every boss theme has a reason for its existence. And I want to talk about Fortisax for a moment. Much like we hear the horse's neigh in Ludwig the Holy Blade and his fall from grace, we hear the sadness of Fortisax, the clamoring for answers, the desperation for understanding. The organ in this piece brings us to the majesty of the dragon's size, prowess, and power. The rage, the inherent anger, the almost frenzy that Fortisax is in. The second phase, then ushering in a renewed sense of purpose and a focused determination, communicated as the entire piece comes together into unison movement. Unison movement is a powerful tool for unrelenting purpose, focus, and unbendingness. It also has substantial ostinato and arpeggiated string movement that showcases the clattering sky full of red lightning. The timpani, showcasing size and stomping and force. This is a fantastic showcase of what a boss theme can and should be. The thing is though, good boss music isn't just exciting or energetic, it showcases the subtext of the enemies we fight. It communicates their character, the motivation these powerful foes have to fight us, and that's especially the case in this next song, Mog, Lord of Blood. In this song, we discover who Mog is and his story, his vile rage shown through Baroque harpsichord movement. Yet, we also hear an elegant side to Mog, a subtle edge of conflict as well between the male and female voices, until they come together. This could represent Mog and Mikla, or perhaps him and his twin Margit, who remain loyal to the Golden Order, unlike Mog. But what is exceptional is how the song finally displays Mog's deceptive nature and his capacity to turn his back on trusted allies. As is the case with many of these second phases and boss themes, we have a shifted intention where things come together unapologetically. Mog, removed from the worry of being caught in his deception, doubles down in his betrayal. The spinning, descending voices expose his evil, his joy in triumph, and his unwillingness to let anyone get in the way of that. Mog is the true villain of this broken and destroyed world. These songs, in a way, are character studies, and the same thing can be said for the next song. Godric the Grafted. The deformed, vile, vicious tornado of disgust and power that is Godric the Grafted. We hear his deformity, his vileness, his disgust, the loss of his beauty. Godric is a disgusting spiral of ugliness, and his music tells us everything. He plods towards us, he slams at us, attempts to tenderize us. He has lost himself, and this music with its spidering and twisting shows everything Godric feels without him explicitly saying it. He is a tornado of violence and disgust. This is effective, but admittedly, here is where I believe the music of Elden Ring falters slightly. Everything, if lumped together, tends to ultimately be different, but sound very similar. There are minimal surprises. Much of the boss themes are samey and a bit repetitive. They communicate same emotions that could be used to describe nearly every boss. However, there are some exceptions and surprises worth mentioning. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, a somber, slow track where we once again hear the ebbs and flows, calling back to Limgrave and Leyndell. And those ebbs and flows do a few things for this track exceptionally well. For one, it showcases Renala's pain, her emptiness, her desire to have things be different, with a constant plodding pain. The gentle sound of the xylophone in the distance signifying the twinkling moonlight. The children's choir sustains a constant pattern, which is chilling, yet vulnerable, accentuated by strings that seem to dance around it. What I love is how Renala's theme breaks the mold with its second phase. It's surprisingly slow. The piano comes to the forefront and resembles a heartbeat mixed with children singing on oo vowels and a descending solo child. The twinkling moonlight is more prominent here. All of this paints a picture for us. For the first time in the game, we witness a character not just trying to break us in this ruined world, but who has been broken by it. A song that stands out in a different way to me as well is Starscourge Radahn. Strength, size, power, applauding and marching sound quality. This song is hammering in one thing: the celebration of this mighty warrior. The first phase of this builds up his might as one of the mightiest of all the demigods. You feel like you're fighting a legend, but as the song continues, it takes an unexpected twist. We actually experience a slowing down in the second phase. An almost mournful, patriotic, and deeply reflective, strong beat pattern that seems to bow down to a fallen and mighty warrior. The music doesn't escalate. Instead, it slows down, but it also becomes more patriotic and triumphant. Why? The trumpets blaring in the distance, long choral notes, and drumming patterns of percussion. It's like a military funeral, saying farewell to a fallen protector, paying homage and respect to one of the greatest warriors ever seen in the lands between, commending Radahn for the great achievements he laid claim to in his life. Farewell to Starscourge Radahn. I love hearing the emotion and feeling music carries with it, but one song in particular had me taken aback. In what feels like a Fromsoft first, we experience a fight with something sacred and unexpected: the regal ancestor spirit. In this fight, we experience a conflict we don't want. This theme borrows heavily from the sound quality we hear in the area around it, almost like an extension of nature itself. While the piece is not necessarily melodic, we can come to understand the great spirit of this beast, the elegant beauty in its size, and the way it carries itself with grace and beauty, the twirling strings and moving and swelling instrumentation that ushers forth this dancing and bounding beast. This spirit is resurrected, but not with any desire for harm or vengeance against us, and the music accompanying this communicates it perfectly. There is one final boss theme I want to examine, but first, I want to talk about something prevalent all through Elden Ring's soundtrack. One of the overarching musical concepts in the Elden Ring soundtrack is leitmotif. A leitmotif is a recurring musical theme associated with a particular character, place, or idea. We hear leitmotifs everywhere. Every time we hear a boss, that is a leitmotif. That introduces the character. If a character comes back, the leitmotif plays. That is the concept of the leitmotif. In the opening, we are exposed to the history of the lands between for the first time. We hear the Elden Ring main theme, the cellos, the low strings, the timpani, the buildup of that astounding choir, all of which is slowed down with pulsating strings that usher us into this bleak and broken world. The drums and the sharp rhythm and its slow and plodding pattern thrusts us into the death, decay, and disarray that this world inhabits. The mistakes, the hardships, and the battles fought and won by this Wagnerian cast of characters. So when the main theme of Elden Ring is established and reinforced, we then reach Radagon of the Golden Order, with that main theme and that leitmotif once again. And this is what makes Elden Ring so amazing. This payoff bookends the experience. We get it at the beginning, and we get it at the end. And it becomes a gut punch. I want to talk about the final theme because in my eyes, it is one of the greatest achievements of this entire soundtrack. Out of the bookended main theme of Elden Ring emerges the Elden Beast, and we are greeted by one of the most haunting compositions in Fromsoft history, in my opinion. Made even more profound from the previous tenaciously volatile and powerful Radagon sequence, we are left with the simplicity of the harp, the solo soprano, and the delicate emptiness between these two instruments. This is the end. This is the mournful tragedy of a broken world. This is the mourning of a loved one. The astounding new beginning that life can provide through great tragedy and loss. This is the ascension of the soul as it flies towards new beginnings. This is the brokenness and potential to rise again in spite of so much loss and say, I will begin again. The boldness of choosing to end such a profoundly massive game with such a vast soundtrack with a simple chant of soprano vocals and choir mixed with harp is a bold and beautiful move that I think transcends the experience. A slow song as a final boss theme is a radical choice. Note how many times a slow theme exists in video games. There aren't many iterations of it, and the few that do exist come from, well, partially Fromsoft games. Of course, there's expectations that boss themes would have these epic big moments of gameplay, plot, and music. It's the big final payoff. Of course we want that. Yet to have something like the Elden Beast play is profound. It is still easily one of my favorite tracks from this entire soundtrack. So what makes Elden Ring's soundtrack so great anyway? Every song serves a story. The soundtrack aids in telling the monumental narrative of this bleak and forgotten world. Whether it's the use of slightly atonal songs, the ebb and flows, the use of leitmotif, the ambient music, all of it enhances our understanding of the world and characters. Removing these songs is like removing dialogue from a character. But what I love most is it helps us players to become better listeners, to pull ourselves away from the gameplay and its systems and connect ourselves more deeply, because the emotions we experience while listening to the music in Elden Ring is human. The characters we fight and the worlds we explore are human, with stories to tell and feelings to uncover, and the composers of this game have done it more than well, with layers of strings, percussion, and emotion. If you want to understand your favorite bosses, understand their music. You may just see them in a whole new light.